Next up is Ariel Rivera, who's a program associate at Pro Bono Net, working on thoughtful content management, user experience planning, and outreach. After a decade of arts management and human resource systems work, Ariel pivoted to focus on her love of wayfinding, both digital and physical, and projects in the social justice sphere. Aside from work, please feel free to chat with her about all things Colombo, craft beer, and transit, which is a very interesting combination, I think. Ariel's going to talk about imposter syndrome, a tiny toolkit. So take it away, Ari.
All right, I'm Ari. As Sarah mentioned, I work for Pro Bono Net. I work on their Law Help New York team, and I also help with their New York Crime Victims Legal Help website. When I'm not busy doing that, I'm also spending some time volunteering, especially while in quarantine, doing things where I can, primarily using project management tools for a mutual aid group near my house, and with a campaign for New York City mayor, which is pretty exciting. And you can also find me on Twitter talking about public transit, or not talking so much, but more like just ranting. Let's see. Oh my God, we could talk about stuff. I have past work lives, haven't always worked in the tech sphere. I worked with HR, spent a decade working in information systems for that, and just telling people how to reset their password. And I worked for a scavenger hunt company. I've fixed bowling machines. Anyway, if you want to ask me anything about that, hit me up. And then there's stuff that I just want to talk about. Karaoke, craft beer, pop art. Let's talk. Anyway, no matter what field it's been, imposter syndrome has been really familiar to me, and not a great thing. It's unwelcome, but I've had it. Always wants to hang, often wants to linger, doesn't care about making curfew, shows up when it wants to, not a lot of fun to deal with. Uninvited. So imposter syndrome, what's the deal here? I don't really care for it. I'm not a fan. So right now, we'll get into this. What's imposter syndrome? What does it look like? Why you shouldn't feel like the worst if you've experienced it, and you shouldn't. And what we can do about it in small steps. And what I want to say just as a note, this is not a talk where I'll have a lot of imposter syndrome statistics. It's not something where I'm suggesting broad changes. I'm very much focused on tiny, small things that you can do practically just in your regular everyday life without the big expectation that very quickly there'll be this sudden change. And then there are other talks out there that I just want to mention. They're really wonderful and do talk scientifically about what kinds of groups, or which pretty much everyone, get imposter syndrome or feel that way and experience it. This is not that, but I'm happy to point you in that direction as well. There's a lot of great things out there and people who discuss it. So just as a note. So imposter syndrome, this is it, right? I don't know. I haven't seen this show. Maybe I want to see this show. If you've seen this show, tell me if it's good. I don't really know what it's about. It's this. A psychological condition that involves persistent doubt concerning one's abilities or accomplishments, accompanied by the fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence of one's ongoing success. So I just want to stress there's this persistent doubt. You're not feeling good. And there's that fear of being exposed as a fraud. You feel like a fake. And it can get near on ridiculous because, as the definition says, and it was just added to the dictionary in April, which is kind of funny, this is in spite of ongoing success. So you can be doing really well, and in the workplace, let's say you can have your colleagues who who rely on you and trust you and who would otherwise probably say really great things about you. But for you, you still have this notion that, maybe you don't quite belong there. And I just want to point out the difference between an actual imposter here, which is why this is crossed out, and imposter syndrome. When you're actually an imposter, you're actually trying to deceive someone, and you are trying to be a fake or fraud. That's a difference. It's intentional. With imposter syndrome, you're quite feeling like you are, but you're really not. It's not an activity. It's not a hobby of yours. It's not real. You're not actually the fraud. And if there's something that could make you feel that way, hopefully you can take steps to change it. But with imposter syndrome, it can bring up these sentiments. I'm a fake. I'm a fraud. I'm not good enough. I don't deserve what I have. Or maybe the other people in the room do, but I don't. I don't know how I got here. And I don't belong here, not with them. I'm not smart enough. I'm not funny enough. I'm not good enough. So this is like, whoa, not feeling so hot when this suddenly happens, or not so suddenly. Have you ever experienced this? If you have, a lot of people do. It's very common. These are some people by their own admission who have been in the same boat. So, politicians, writers, celebrities, actors. I guess you can ignore cat, pin, fine. But anyway, it's very common. And it happens in multiple spheres of one's life. So it can be socially, it can be professionally, in academia, any realm, this can just kind of pop up. So not great, but you're not alone. I've been feeling it for years. So here's me. I'm here trying to intimidate imposter syndrome. It popped up and it's here, and I'm like, hey, you get out of here. I want to feel really good right now. We're not doing this. And then within seconds, you can see that I'm basically getting eaten up by Pac-Man, or he's holding on to me for any moment now. That's going to happen. And I will want to say it's, again, very common. Anytime I've brought up imposter syndrome to anyone, the overwhelming majority of the time, they tend to fall into one of two camps. So either they've heard of it and they can totally relate and they're like, I've had that. I don't like it. Or they've never heard of the term, but now they're starting to think of times when maybe they've experienced it. So I'm not saying everyone, but I'm saying it's pretty common. There are a lot of people out there. So it's okay, and you're not on your own. And for me, let's see. Whoa, what music video is this? Think about it. We're not. But I have this here because I can think of some times when I've experienced imposter syndrome, and they really range areas of my life. So even just going to like bar trivia, I've almost gotten kicked off of my team, not because I wasn't good at answering or coming up with anything, and I'm really bad at that, but more because when I did know the answer, I wouldn't say anything. I would look around at my team and I'd be like, oh, I really think it's this, but like someone else probably would have said that by now. And if they think, oh, that's this person, they must be right. Everyone here is great. And I probably don't know what I'm talking about. So even in trivia, that would happen. And then after, when we get the answer wrong, because I didn't input, didn't say what I really thought was right about it, I'd have to be like, oh my God. I knew that. And it would make everyone frustrated because it was over weeks and months, and this would keep happening. And once again, I almost got kicked off, not because of wrong answers, but because I just wasn't sharing what I thought. And everyone thought it was okay for you to be wrong as long as you try to contribute. So that's for me socially. I've had plenty of other times where imposter syndromes come up. And I can think of recently, even at my current job, I've only been working there since January, and it's a legal tech nonprofit. So we help other nonprofits help people who need legal resources. And that involves not just building online tools, but also having some legal knowledge. I have zero legal background. So when I'm sitting in a meeting with my colleagues, people on my team, people I really like and get along with and see or talk to every week, even if it's just virtually, I look around and I think about our content meetings, for example. I don't know these legal issues. I'm not a lawyer. Why am I here? I get very anxious. I start to think, you know what? I love this job, but I don't know if I belong here. And that's another example of where it's really not fair to myself, because I am there for a reason. And I do have the technical background to do my job well. That's why I'm there. And that's why I've been there since January. But it's hard in the moment. It's very easy to fall into those times when you're just saying, well, you know, there's one thing and now it's just not good enough. I don't really know what to do about it. The other thing I can think of is even in coming up with this talk and thinking about being here with you. One of my coworkers in another department had said, like, why is it a tiny toolkit? Does that show that you have imposter syndrome? Why are you saying it's just tiny? And that kind of stuck with me. I'm like, well, why would I just offer tiny? Is there something wrong with me for saying that? But really, in all honesty, I just think, well, for what I've needed, I just need really small bits. And I know that I just need to go with tiny steps. Imposter syndrome is hard enough as it is when you can plan for it. And you don't want to set yourself up for failure, at least not to me. But anyway, it's ongoing. But I'm better off now that I'm able to reflect on it than before. If it's so common with people, why is this even happening? Well, there are a lot of factors here. There's a lot going on. I would say, at least within tech, there's so much pressure. You know, there are insecurities about one's own ability, your educational background, maybe your income background, how you got there, where you're going. You know, there's always a question on me, like, did I go to a boot camp? Did I go to a college for this? You know, who do I know? If I'm not in with certain networks, am I less than? So there's a lot of pressure there. And I think that's the nature of the industry. New languages, updating systems, being expected to know how things are changing as they're changing is something that is not necessarily unique to this industry, but one that does not quite fall into line with others. And then there's perceived expectations concerning work performance, not just from managers, but also from your peers. I'd say there's a lot of pressure and there can be a lot of doubt that comes from even like work-life balance. Are you able to take breaks? Are you supposed to be on call at any given moment in the day? What's the expectation for being someone who knows everything? Are you in a work culture where you can ask questions? Are you in a place where you can act as a team? Or is there some kind of fault there if you can admit that maybe you don't know everything? Or that you want to ask? Ask for help, ask for guidance, ask for a mentor. So there are plenty of talks that can go into why this happens, why it's so common, but that deserves its own discussion. Why not just get over it? Well, I really hate that. I feel like people mean well, and you might have a friend who says like, oh, you're feeling bad, you know, oh, that's terrible, but you know what? This is gonna pass in a second, and that's great. But then there's some people who are really like, that's not real. What are you talking about? Get over it. And I could get upset about this, but really I'll just say, imposter syndrome is an ongoing issue again. And it is one that goes on just as much as it's situational. And every person's unique, and you have your own personal experience with it, not just when it happens, but also in addressing it and in your response. So I would just hope that everyone here knows that why not just get over it is probably not the right question to ask, even if you mean well. And let's see, why is it not the right thing? I'd say another reason it's not the right thing is that this is happening in real time. So I know myself that I experience imposter syndrome, and I can anticipate it sometimes. But often it's just happening. It's happening in a moment. It's happening in real time. I'm already in the meeting and I already feel like my input doesn't mean as much. I could consider applying for a job or going to an interview, and then the deadline is here, or the moment is about to come, and I'm just thinking, you know what? Someone else out there, they deserve it more. We can be in the same level, be colleagues, and I just would think, you know, I don't think I have what it takes. Maybe I won't bother. Maybe I'm going to cancel. It's happening in real time. Plenty of times where I've thought, you know, like, oh man, I'm so stoked to go to this event. You know, I'm not big on networking, but I'm excited for this one. And then the time comes and I'm just thinking, you know, like I'm going to go back and that's it. I'm just going to cancel. I'm not going to be able to talk to anyone. No one's going to want to talk to me. It's not going to feel good. I'll have nothing to say. Or here, you know, you've signed up for a conference, and even though it's possibly a conference that is specific in theme, and everyone else is signing up for it for the specific theme, you just decide, well, maybe you're the odd one out. Maybe you don't want to go. Maybe you don't want to participate. It's just not worth it. You don't have anything good to say. These are all things that are happening in that real moment, in real time. So you can't quite get over it. Not that easily. So no matter what the situation may be, I think the sentiments are relatable, even if it happens for us in different moments. It's tiring, it's a bummer. Let's do something about it. Tiny toolkit. Anyway, I just want to reiterate that these are small things, and they're small for a reason. And it's because, once again, imposter syndrome is hard enough as it is. And I would rather not set myself up to be disappointed by trying to make broad changes in a matter of just a few minutes or days. And I also want to admit that it isn't just a solution situation. It's about meeting it, addressing it, and hoping that you can manage your response as it's happening. So I'm thinking about small actions, some things to remember, and then you can decide what mental image you might want for your toolkit. I was recently thinking maybe it'd be Hello Kitty and her twin sister Mimi. Maybe you don't want to do that for yourself. Let me know. It's not necessary though. All right. First thing I would always do, once I decided that I was going to start addressing this, is brainstorm. From what you've heard, I've experienced this quite a bit. And even though it'll just pop up sometimes, for me, since I know there are certain stressors, I decided, well, what are those stressors? Is it a meeting? For me, it's a content meeting because I don't create content and I'm in that meeting and maybe I just feel like I don't belong. For you, is it seeing people just generally? Is it an event? Is there anything that you can anticipate? And so the small step here, I would say first, is jotting it down or brainstorming. If this is something that is a little too stressful in itself, don't do it. But for me, I just think just the act of writing in a journal or trying to acknowledge what those stressors are is helpful. And then once I see at least, okay, well, I know I'm going to be doing this weekly and I don't feel good about it. What can I do about it? And I think small things I can do, just as an example, and everyone is different, schedule out a few minutes before a meeting to take a walk. Scheduling out time to look at the agenda again. It's a matter of knowing yourself and knowing if you want to check in or check out, and which is going to be more relaxing or less stressful for you. Scheduling time to reach out to someone that you trust or support. And that can be a check-in. I would say you can talk about what it is that you're expecting or not sure about, or it can just be a hi. Before joining this morning on this call, I really just went on Instagram and just thought, let me just be mindless for a moment. That's what's going to be what's right for me, just for a few minutes. And I would say the important thing is to take the small moments to plan, because there's so much about experience imposter syndrome that's unexpected. So why not do what you can? Once again, reach out. Do you have someone that you trust? A friend of yours, a colleague, someone who could be supportive of you? Reach out to them. And try to think of someone that you can consistently reach out to. And that, once again, is a small thing. You don't have to unload or try to make some kind of plan to resolve things necessarily. It's more that you can plan right before the thing that's like the event that is going to be stressful or that you anticipate being stressful. And just shoot a text. Whatever works for you. You can say like, hey, I'm going to this. I don't feel that great about it. I think I mentioned it to you before. Or once again, if checking out is better, saying like, hey, yeah, send me a cat photo. That's what I'm looking for right now. And I would say if you have a friend or colleague or someone that you can reach out to, I definitely recommend, if you can, that's someone who will nudge you and will say like, oh, well, you're nervous about it. Like maybe, I know you really wanted to go to this. Maybe you should. Or ask you, what's the harm? But also have it be someone who knows you or your situation well enough to not push, not too hard, because that's also not fair to you. Similarly, find your network. So whether or not you have someone you can turn to specifically, I would also recommend this. Just in terms of like networking, I used to be extremely anxious and I couldn't really go to any events. I just didn't feel like anyone would want to hear what I had to say or even chat over soda. I'd say an online community, for example, like Code and Supply, their Slack channel, or for me, Women Who Code, I would say that can be really low pressure. These communities often have channels also that go beyond their mission statement. So you think Women Who Code, okay. I mean, maybe you're thinking of women and coding, but there are also channels just about things like speaking. You know, different Slack communities may have specific channels around mental health. A safe space, even virtually, that's low pressure, where you can talk about things that are very relatable. And so the small stuff there is to seek that out. And I can definitely help if you want to chat with me about that, about how to start. But, you know, I don't know if you've heard of Google, but that works. And even within this community, I'm pretty sure there are people who know networks that might work for you based on what you're interested in. But it's very low pressure, which is why I recommend this. You can participate, or you can just be a lurker for a bit until you get comfortable. But that's really what's made a difference for me many a time in getting more comfortable and actually being in a space with others and feeling like maybe I do belong there. I'm going to move a little faster now, but another thing is noting literally the positive. This is the key thing about Tiny Toolkit, I'd say. For all these negative feelings about feeling like you're a fraud, what do you know that you're doing right? Write it down, literally. I definitely recommend making little cards, little notes, you know, like, hey, you know, this is why I'm at this job. This is why they hired me. I did this right. I'm feeling really good. I'd say it's tiny cards or a tiny notebook, but it has to be something that you can hold and have with you. Or if you actually look at all your apps, I get overwhelmed by my apps, so I wouldn't use a notes app. But if you actually would use and look at your notes app, that's also an option as well. And I would just say it's so hard to find some things like that sometimes on your own, especially when you're not feeling good. And that's when I would say, maybe reach out to a friend or say like, hey, like, what's that thing that you said? Or find an email, even if a birthday email. Find the positive and make it small and something that you can have with you. Make your moments. I feel like people have been talking about this in other talks, completely unrelated to this, but absolutely make your moments. When you're stressed, just pausing my timer, so I know I'm almost out. When you're stressed, sometimes you really just need to check in about what else you're doing. Like outside of work, do you want to learn something new? Can you start a new hobby? Go back to an old hobby? Do you just want to take a nap? Make sure that you're taking time for this. If your work's your life, that's not going to help you in your moments when you're especially stressed. And it's not going to lead you in the right direction. And I would just acknowledge that even if it's taking a nap and making time for that, if that's what you want, that's absolutely a good thing. I say push yourself. Things are going to happen, not necessarily when you're expecting it. And don't give up the first time when you have your inner voice saying that you're not quite good enough. It's just going to happen. And all you can do is practice and try to push back on that voice. By the way, that music video was Britney Spears' Toxic. And I only mentioned that because finally at trivia, someone asked what that music video was in a visual round. And I think that was one of the first times that I said, I know what that is. Instead of looking around and just thinking, no one's mentioned this yet. I don't have anything to say here. Finally answered. And if you haven't seen that video, it's pretty silly. And then some final things to remember. Once again, you're not alone in this. It's common. That may not always make you feel too good anyway, but there's nothing wrong with it. It's okay to take steps at your own pace. You should, because it's you. And it's okay to make mistakes. You don't want to compare yourself to others. That's also really hard. But what you can do is try to remember what you're doing right, and that, you're on your way. Start small. So even just 5 minutes, even just a few notes. Don't pressure yourself to do everything all at once. And thanks. I'm grateful for this community. I'd love to keep the discussion going, and I'm happy to share resources about many, many things around this topic of imposter syndrome that I couldn't even get to today. Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you, Ari. That was great. One of the things you'd mentioned was having a friend to reach out. Do you think it's helpful for this friend to be somebody outside of work, or a coworker, or perhaps both?
I would say that's one thing that I definitely recommend doing your own small brainstorm for. There are times when I've had specifically a work friend, and if you would have that connection with someone in your workplace, I'd say take advantage of it, because they really will probably have similar experience with you. Maybe they're dealing with the same manager, or on the same roadmap in terms of a project and dealing with similar stressors. So even if they're obviously a different person, I think a workplace person to confide in is really helpful. But at the same time, if you're even nervous about talking with someone in your workplace about even feeling this way, if you have someone who just understands you and is a friend, there's nothing wrong with that either, and I encourage it. More the merrier, even though I do think you should start with one main person for check-ins if it's something that's really giving you anxiety.
Yeah. So for you personally, do you feel like over time, just your awareness of imposter syndrome and knowing about your toolkit that you've come up with helps make it less intense over time?
Yes, but for me, absolutely not speaking to anyone else's experience. And there are plenty of times when I still am thinking at the last second, like, oh, I'm not going to do that. No one's going to want to talk to me. So it's not foolproof. But at the same time, when I wasn't addressing it, or if I didn't even really know that imposter syndrome was something that related to me, and for a long time I didn't, I wasn't searching for something I didn't know about. I'm better off now. And it can be really hard, but I'd say even just, like I said, that meeting that is a stressor, I can go on Instagram for 5 minutes. That's one of those times where I'm not checking into the stressor. And every situation is different for me, but that's one example of time where I'm checking out for 5 minutes right before. I'm looking at some memes, and it can be really helpful. But it is something that I've practiced. I hate using that word because it's so personal, and you can't practice enough to the point like, oh, I'm going to learn this chord on a guitar. So it's not the same as that. But it's like the muscle memory in its own way. So it has been helpful, as long as I acknowledge that the tiny steps are what work for me. And then it's not the end of the world if I am having a bad day anyway.